Some people's definition of being rich is different from others. But what I think holding gold and silver will do for you over the long term is protect what you've built up already. And sometimes it might even give you some more, depending on how badly the currency does. Saturday, September 23rd, 2023, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today we're going to look at the controlled demolition of the pound, yes, the currency we use in the UK, and this is applicable for all the major currencies in the West and even in the BRICS nations, I would say. And no one is exempt to the inflation that we're seeing. And I think this past week was highly significant. And I'm not surprised, though, what happened this week. The Bank of England just caved in its fight against inflation. Well, maybe if you understand the system that the Bank of England is, along with its agent banks and the government, they're the ones who create the inflation. And what do I mean by that? Well, I'll give you a really simple example. Let's say that for some reason I took over the town that I live in, and along with my followers on the internet or on YouTube, I gave the biggest donors on Patreon, I gave them a license to open a Bank of Monaco 64 and gave them the power to issue these Bank of Monaco banknote. So what does it say here? It says, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of 100 pounds. So there you go. And for Monaco 64, you can replace your name or, the Bank of Jones, Bank of Smith. And the more interesting thing about this bank and its notes and its currency is that it's the only one that can be used to buy goods and services, the only one that can be used to pay tribute to Monaco 64. So what do you think would happen? Well, I would be in control of issuing this. I could go out and buy anything I wanted. My followers as well, who are the biggest contributors and who open their own little banks, they would issue more of these on the back of more of these. I would issue them some reserves, and they could issue currency as well, backed by me. And can you imagine what would happen to prices of things if we could go out and buy all the nice cars, go to all the nice restaurants? Well, people would realize there's something wrong. And that's what our current system is all about. It's the Bank of England, right? And they've got their friends at the top who they give the power to issue this currency. And along with government, they control everything. And I'm going to stop right here at this explanation, but I highly recommend that you read this book, What Government Has Done to Our Money, The Case for 100% Gold Dollar by Murray Rothbard. And it applies not just to the US, it applies to the UK and all the other countries that use fiat currency. Just to give you a brief explanation of that book, well, the biggest take from that book is that money is a construct of human society, and it evolved from barter, when people bartered things that had value. So if I wanted something of value from you, I'd have to give you something of value that you wanted. So barter was always kind of difficult because you couldn't match wants and needs a lot of times. And eventually, through trial and error, through the market system, through trade, through custom, people found that there were some commodities, some things that everyone always wanted, and some commodities that held their value for for ages, for thousands of years, that had very little use in terms of consumption. So its supply didn't dwindle or evaporate out of, wasn't consumed. So it became money, and that's what this book explains. And it would be great if all school children could read this book. The world, I think, would be a much better place. So what I'm trying to say here, money is more than just a promise. It's something real that represents your efforts and your ingenuity, your hard work, right? Your labor, your ideas to develop goods and services and inventions and all that. But suffice it to say, gold and silver up until the beginning of World War I, they were money, and they had been money and even currency for thousands of years. So the system we have now is one that is an aberration. But be as it may, I want to talk about the UK today because I've been warning not just the public here on YouTube since late 2015, but also ever since around 2006 and 7, I could feel that governments around the world back then were increasing spending. They were borrowing a lot. And what made me realize that, well, you'd listen to Gordon Brown, who was the chancellor at the time. He'd come out every year to give his budget, and he was just handing out billions and billions. And he was doing things that I thought were wrong, that were going to drive the country into ruin. And I even had a discussion at the time at work. I used to work at MF Global, or Man Financial as it was known at the time, back in 05, 06. And we just listened to one of these budgets, and I said at my desk, oh, this country's he's going to ruin this country, he's going to bring it down. And someone else heard that, and they said, oh, you're crazy, what are you talking about? And I wrote, as you can see here, I had my own blog. It was called forsoundmoney.com, and I did that in my spare time outside of work. I warned back in 06 and 07 that all fiat currencies were sinking, and they're going to continue to sink because that's what happens. Voltaire once said, the paper money or fiat currency always returns to its intrinsic value of zero, right? And you notice that the Bank of England notes used to be pretty similar to that, just a white piece of paper with writing on it. But as the scam gets older, they had to embellish their notes, right? Now they're trying to get rid of notes, make it all digital because they're up to here in that. But anyway, so I have been warning people about this. And so what happened in 07, 08? Well, everything imploded, right? It was, they call it the global financial crisis, but it was more of a Western banking financial crisis that brought down the whole banking system. And that's what we're going to go over today, why we are in the predicament where they have to demolish the pound. And by demolishing, I mean just chipping away at the purchasing power of the pound. So, and the other reason I'm doing this, of course, is because, the Bank of England has given up on its fight against inflation. It kept rates unchanged. It seems to think that even though the RPI, for example, is almost at 10%, that 5% will rein in inflation. But as I said, they're the ones who create inflation. So they're just trying to manage perception, trying to fool you into thinking that everything's going to be better. But I want to go back to this event here back in 2000, I think it was 10. And May 2010. What's so special about that date? Well, it's the date that the Conservatives took over from New Labour, or the Labour Party had been in power since 97 to 2010. And we're hearing now a lot of talk. Well, the favorite scapegoat, and I warned that back about this in 2015-16, is Brexit. Of course, Brexit is creating all our economic woes, right? The other one now is 13 years of conservatives. That's why the economy is so bad. Now we're hearing that Keir Starmer is going to make everything better, right? Just by, working more with the Office of Budget Responsibility. Yes, it's not going to make any difference, people. And I'm going to show you why. And am I pro-labor or pro-conservative? No. And you'll see why. It doesn't matter who's in power. It doesn't matter about all the distractions out there. You need to follow the money. And in this case, it's the pound and the fact that it's being destroyed. The purchasing power has been destroyed. And that's why you find that things are so much more unaffordable. That's why we're seeing people go on strike, because it doesn't pay to work anymore. So let's go back, though, to May 2010. And this is from the Guardian newspaper. Ex-Treasury Secretary Liam Burns' note to his successor. There's no money left. Byrne left letter on desk for incoming Minister David Laws. So just quickly go through this, and then we're going to go to some charts, and that will hopefully help you understand what's going on. It says the former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Liam Byrne, has reignited criticism of Labour's stewardship of the economy with a note for his successor, which said, there's no money left. Byrne's note was discovered by David Laws, the Liberal Democrat MP who was appointed by the coalition government to succeed Byrne as number 2 at the Treasury. It is a convention for outgoing ministers to leave a note for their successors with advice on how to settle into the job. But Byrne's note, which he later said was intended as a private joke, drew attention to Labour's economic record when it was revealed by Laws at a press conference today. Laws told reporters, when I arrived at my desk on the very first day as Chief Secretary, I found a letter from the previous Chief Secretary to give me some advice. I assumed on how I conduct myself over the months ahead. Unfortunately, when I opened it, it was a one-sentence letter which simply said, Dear Chief Secretary, I'm afraid to tell you there's no money left. So there you go. So now I'm going to show you why, in my opinion, the pound in your pocket is going to continue to shrink. Of course, it's still going to be the same 5-10 pound note, or it could be a CBDC if they succeed in bringing that in. But what I mean is the purchasing power thereof is going to continue to shrink. I think the best way to show you that is through data and charts. So we're going to start with crippled by debt. And as I said earlier, in a fiat currency system, the more debt you have in the system, the more money you have in the system. So I have to say the UK national or public debt, it's not very transparent to get the numbers. Sometimes we're told that it's just under 100% of GDP. Here, the OECD said in, when was it, 2016, that it was up to 120% of GDP. But the thing to realize here is that prior to the 07-08 crisis, as you can see, the debt to GDP was well below 60%, and all of a sudden it shot up. And it stayed up there, and we're still up there. And as you can see here, we've gone from spending 36% of GDP as a government to now spending over 50% of GDP. That's very important as well. So the 36% was in the year 2000, and by 2020, we're up to 50%. So knowing now that governments and their agent banks, the central bank, the Bank of England, that really is not independent, they can't create the currency out of thin air. And that's what they did back in '07 and '08. And why do they do that? Well, because the banks in the UK were failing, were collapsing. They had to, the government had to borrow hundreds of billions, and we borrowed hundreds of billions more back in 2020 for another crisis, right? And who financed that? Well, it was the Bank of England by printing reserves out of thin air and going into the market and buying those government bonds and making sure that interest rates stayed very low so that the government could service that debt and bail out everything. And when you do that, of course, you create currency. The government creates currency out of thin air. It's as if one day there's a crisis in the Monaco 64 land or in the Smith land, wherever land you want to make up, and you had to issue like millions of these. And the excuse, of course, and you use your media outlets, your friends, to make up a story. Oh, we need to do this because we've got this other town. They're coming to steal all our things. They're gonna end our freedom. So we need a lot of money to defend ourselves. And that's the kind of thing that happens. Or I could come out and say all the Monaco 64 banks, for some reason they're in trouble. For some unforeseen reason, right? Or they took all the money that you're supposed to have put in there. So that's what happened in '08, '09. And so what's the best way for the government then to be able to carry that debt through the decades and lumber you with it? Well, they make the currency worth less. So the currency is the other side of the debt. So if you have a debt that's worth a pound that you can buy a coffee with, and then that becomes, you need like 10 pounds to buy a cup of coffee, that becomes worth less and less. And that's what the government and the Bank of England have been doing since 2008, as you can see here, and how I've got a chart of the British pound versus the dollar. And you can see that it's in a continuous decline. Yes, there are ups and downs, but the trend, as the old saying goes, the trend is your friend. In this case, it's not your friend. So what's that gonna continue to do? Well, that's gonna continue to help people that are in debt, like the government, people who have taken on too much debt to buy their homes, big mortgages. Yeah, any company that depends on credit. Well, our economy depends on credit, and that's why you see here that the pound is turning back down versus the dollar, because the Bank of England has come out and said they're happy with not enough with their fight against inflation. So you can bet that the dollar is going to continue to appreciate versus the pound. Does that mean that you want to have dollars? Well, I'll come to that in a minute. But as you can see, it doesn't matter who's in power. We could have Keir Starmer next after Rishi Sunak, or he could stay in power. But the trend is definitely lower. And I think, as you can see, those pink boxes, those are like where they manage the currency. They manage it in a band, and then after a while, they just lower it. And I think we're on the cusp of where they go from like 120 to, let's say, 140. Now we'll go from, to the next band is going to be 1 to 120. And we could even see the pound go below 1 to the dollar, I would say, in the next 5 years or so. Of course, it's not a perfect line, but it's management of the currency. That's what they do. Before we look at why the dollar is not really the solution, I want to show you some charts of the price of crude oil first in ounces of gold. So this is just how many barrels of oil you can buy for 1 troy ounce of gold. And I've got a couple of coins here. One is an American, one is the Britannia, and I've got a barrel of oil. So yeah, if you take away that spike in 2020, that was crazy spike when oil went negative and gold went up to like 2000. That's why you could get so much oil there for 1 ounce of gold. And I don't even think it was when gold went to 2000, but the fact that oil went negative, which was a freak incident to do with trying to deliver oil in Oklahoma. You couldn't deliver it, so you had to get rid of it because it would cost too much for you to hold that oil. But anyway, one thing to take from this is that the price of oil in gold is always very steady. It seems it doesn't go, up or down. It's just very flat. And what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that gold is a good store of value. And many people think that it's oil that creates inflation, but it's not, right? Oil doesn't create inflation, because if you have sound money, you can always buy plenty of oil. As you can see here, it's the fiat currency that is inflated, and then you can buy less and less barrels of oil. And I've done the same exercise with the CRB. What's the CRB? Well, it's a basket of commodities, which actually includes gold. And you can see that gold is done very well in terms of buying a basket of the CRB index. So now let's look at the price of gold in pounds. And this is per gram of gold, not troy ounces. So if you want to have the price that is usually quoted, you multiply it by 31.1 if you want to know the price, which is around 1,573. But what I'm trying to tell you here, show you, is look at how much worse the pound is done, for example, relative to oil, because you can get a lot, you need a lot more pounds to get a gram of gold. As you can see, the price of gold in pounds has gone up 771% since the beginning of the century, 21st century. Why am I showing you the price of gold in pounds? Well, because gold has been money and a stable store of value, as you saw there, through the price of oil and commodities, not just in the last 30, 40 years, but for thousands of years. Is it any wonder that a lot of the BRICS nations are starting to buy gold? Is it any wonder that a lot of the central banks, or most of them, hold gold as a reserve? And we know that JP Morgan, when he was asked in Congress, I think in 1912 or 13, what gold was, he said, well, gold is simply money and everything else is credit. So here I've done it the other way around. It's the price of the pound in grams of gold. So that's how many grams of gold you get for 1 pound. And this just goes to show you that the pound is sinking. They are demolishing it. It's a controlled demolition. And I think what happened last year with Liz Truss, well, they lost control a little bit of the demolition, and they had to back off a little bit, but they're going to continue. Don't be fooled. And why? Well, because it's the only way to carry the amount of debt that we have. So here I've got silver, the price of silver in pounds. Yes, that hasn't done as well as gold, but it's up almost 500% in the 21st century, as you can see there, 478%. And here is the final chart that I wanted to show you, because many, of course, say that the dollar's king. You should hold dollars because all the currencies are going down against the dollar. So I did a chart of the dollar versus the pound, and this is USD GBP, not the other way around, since the beginning of the century. And you can see that the dollar's gone up 32% versus the pound. So if you had held dollars instead of gold, you'd have given up on 740% gain, because that's Gold gained 771% versus a pound in the 21st century, and yet the dollar's only gained 32% versus the pound. Some people's definition of being rich is different from others, but what I think holding gold and silver will do for you over the long term is protect what you've built up already, and sometimes it might even give you some more. So the lesson from this, for me, from the fact that the dollar hasn't done anywhere as well as gold, is that it's not just the pound that is being demolished in terms of purchasing power, but it's the dollar as well, and all other fiat currencies. I don't see any change here from this policy of deliberate inflation. So with that, I'm going to wish you all a very good rest of the weekend. Take care. Bye.